Hello all, welcome back to the channel. In the last class, we discussed about constraints and why constraints. Let's have a quick recap and then let us proceed further in today's class. On the first note, I wanted to let you know why constraints are needed. So let's look at into this table. Here in this table, this is an employee table where we have employee ID, employee name, and salary. All these are three columns in the table. Now in this employee ID, we expect the employee ID column to hold only numerical values, employee name column to hold only alphabetical or characters into this particular column, and salary column to hold only number or integer data type into this particular column. There are possibilities that that we might enter other data also into this column. So for that reason only we came across a topic: data entered into a table must be validated. At the entrance itself, they have to be validated. So in order to verify the data at the entrance itself, we have two guardrails or two securities by name, data type and constraints. So data type will make sure that what data type should be entering into a particular column in a table, and constraints tells us, emphasizes that what are the conditions it has to check before the data entering into a column. So we have already understood about the data types in SQL. We understood about constraints also. Let's have a quick recap about constraints. What is a constraint? A constraint, we know that a constraint is a rule applied on a column so that that a table or that particular data is getting validated, and it is making sure the data is accurate and the integrity of data is there. For that reason only, we have this constraint. Why do we need a constraint? Without the constraint, the database would accept anything and everything. In order to avoid all these things only, we need a constraint. By using these constraints, duplicates, null values and invalid values can be stopped at the entrance of the table itself. And by using constraints, we can make sure that we are having meaningful and consistent data inside the table. So what are the different types of constraints we have in SQL Server? We have not null constraint, meaning a particular column in a table should not have null values or blank values in it. It will make sure that there is some value present inside the table. So in an employee table, sorry for that. So we have different constraints in SQL Server. So this not null constraint makes sure that there is no empty space in a particular column or in a particular table. So not null constraints make sure that there are no empty or blank space in a particular column in a table, and this not null constraint is predominantly applied on employee ID column in an employee table, because employee ID column is mandatory, and student ID column is mandatory in a student table, and employee ID column is mandatory in employee table. So if at all you want to make sure that that you don't want to miss out anything, this is a mandatory field, then you can apply this not null constraint. Likewise, we have another constraint by name unique constraints. Unique constraints make sure that all the values inside that particular column, all the rows or tuples or records inside a particular column should be unique. Say for example, we have the mobile numbers in the employee table. See, the mobile numbers should be unique to an should be unique to an employee. So no two numbers can be same. So every mobile number should be unique. So this unique constraints will be able to validate that one. We also saw there is a check constraint. So this check constraint is nothing but a custom condition that we are applying to make sure that the mobile numbers are strictly equal to 10 digits. So any mobile number which is lesser than 9, which is lesser than 10 digits or greater than 10 digits, definitely it will throw an error. So this constraint we studied in the last class, employee ID column we are having, it has a not null constraint and unique constraint. All the values should be present and there should not be any blank values and all the values should be unique. And then we have not null constraint, meaning all the values should be present in name. And then the salary column we have, inside the salary column, we made sure that the check constraint is applied. The salary should be greater than zero and the not null constraint is applied, and the date of joining also not null constraint is applied. And for phone number, we make sure that the phone numbers, all phone numbers inside this column are unique and it is not null, and the check constraint is applied so that the length of the phone number is equal to 10. We also understood about the primary key. What is this primary key? In a table, say, let's say for example, this is an employee table, and this employee table has the employee ID column, name column, salary column, CID column, and the department number column. This employee ID column is the most important column in this employee table, and this employee ID column should make sure that there should not be any null values in it, there should not be not null values in it, and also make sure all the values in it are unique keys. So for this particular primary key is something that we have to understand. This primary key is a combination of unique and not null constraint. So primary key can be applied for a table. There can be only one primary key. Okay, and look into this diagram. What are the characteristics of primary key? We can have only one primary key in a table, and primary key cannot have duplicate values or repeated values in it. And primary key can accept only null, cannot accept null values. Okay, and primary key is also a combination of unique and not null constraint. And primary key is not mandatory but highly recommended. In this table, the primary key is employee ID. In this customer table, the primary key is a CID. In this table, the primary key is department number, which is not null constraint also applied, and also there is unique values present inside this particular primary key in the table. Now, what is a foreign key? Foreign key is a column from another table getting added to another table. So CID is actually a primary key in customer table. Now it is coming to a foreign land called as employee table and it is added, and that becomes a foreign key in an employee table. Likewise, department table has a department number as primary key in its own table. This department number column comes to a foreign land called as an employee table, and department number here becomes the foreign key inside this employee table. Now, this gives you now let's have a quick recap. This characteristics of primary key we discussed. Let's have a characteristics of foreign key. So foreign key is used to establish connection between two tables, and also it makes sure that this particular foreign key establishes a connection between another table. So this is used to link two tables, and it is in the form of a parent-child relationship. Okay, quickly let's recap whatever we have discussed under the foreign key. So it is used to establish a connection between the tables, and also it is a column that represents a primary key in another table. Foreign key is used to establish a connection between the tables, as we see that it is trying to connect connections between the two tables, and also it is a column that references a primary key in another table. So this particular foreign key, which is a foreign key in this particular employee table, is actually a primary key in the customer table, and the department number, which is a foreign key in the employee table, is actually a primary key in the department table. That is what we are trying to cover here, and this gives it is helping us to complete, or it is helping us to connect the two tables, and it is in the form of a parent and child relationship. And some of the characteristics of foreign key is that we can have multiple foreign keys in a table, and foreign key can accept a duplicate or repeated values. Foreign key can accept null values. Foreign key is not a combination of a unique and not null constraints. So it is okay to accept a duplicate and null values. And the most important thing is that foreign key, a column to become a foreign key, it is mandatory that it has to be a primary key in its own table. So the CID If it has to be a foreign key in an employee table, it has to be the CID column should be a primary key in its own table. That is what we are trying to cover here. And foreign key are present in a child table, but it is actually belonging to the parent. It is actually belonging to the parent table. And foreign key allows referential integrity constraints, meaning only when there is a value entered inside the parent key, sorry, primary key in the inside the customer table, those values can be entered inside the foreign key. If at all the primary key is not allowing values, then the foreign key will not allow it here as well. Okay. In today's session, we will be discussing one important thing called as, the interview question: what is the difference between primary key and a foreign key? Okay, differentiate. So let's say that differentiate between primary key and foreign key. Primary key and foreign key. What are the differences? This is a definitely a question that you can expect in interviews. So what is this primary key? What are the differences or the characteristics that it holds? Let's take down without any delay. Okay, so what are the characteristics of a primary key? The first important thing is that primary key is used to uniquely identify a record in a table. So can I say used to uniquely identify a record in a table. Okay, so it is used to uniquely identify a record in a table. And the next important point that you need to remember here is cannot accept null values. This is an important point from primary key. And the next thing is that cannot accept. What is the next thing? Cannot accept duplicate values. Duplicate values it cannot accept. And then it is always a combination of what are the combination? It is a combination of not null and what are the things? It is a combination of not null and a unique constraint. Unique constraints. Okay. So these are the pointers that you need to remember. And the last one important thing here is you have to remember that only one primary key is allowed per table. And let's list down what are the things that we can list under the foreign key. Foreign key is abbreviated as okay, and then close the bracket. Let's bold the statement and then let's take down some points here. The first thing is that used to establish something, we call this as a relationship. Used to establish a relationship or connection between two tables. Okay, this is the first point that you need to understand. The next thing is that can accept. Okay, it can accept. Let me unbold it. Can accept. Okay, what it can accept? It can accept null values. It can accept null values. And the next important thing, not a combination of not null and a unique constraint. It is not a combination of not null and a unique constraint. The last point is that a table can have multiple foreign keys. So this gives you a fair understanding about what is the difference between a primary key and a foreign key. Okay. Now, one more interview question they might ask you. They might ask you some questions about the null also. Let's discuss about the null. They might ask you some questions. So let me give you one thing which is very, very important. You need to understand that null is a keyword. Okay, null is a keyword which is used to represent. If you want to represent nothing or empty cell in SQL, we are using a keyword called as null. So null is a keyword which is used to represent nothing, or an empty cell. So remember this point very, very clearly, because in interview they will test your knowledge. So I will also give you some characteristics of null, so that if at all in interview they are testing you about some understanding, your understanding about null, so you'll be able to answer it. So when I say null, null does not represent zero or space. Remember this clearly. Null doesn't represent zero or space. So null is a null value only. So you cannot comprehend, or you cannot connect zero is a null value or a space is a null value. No, no, no. Null is a null value that cannot be represented using zero or space. Okay. The next thing is that any operations performed on a null will naturally result in null itself. Remember this part. And the next important thing is that null doesn't occupy any memory. Null doesn't occupy any memory. It does not occupy any memory. And the next thing is that we cannot equate to null. Okay, we cannot equate null. So you cannot say that this is equal to null. That you cannot do that. So that is what I'm trying to say here. We cannot equate null. I'll give you one more diagram. This diagram will help you understand null to a greater context. Okay, this is the diagram. Come here. Now, when we look into this diagram, we have employee ID, employee name, and salary, and commission is 30 for A employee. We also have another B employee, and his salary is 200 and commission is null. There is nothing there. So 200 multiplied by null value is null only. 200 his salary plus a null value is null only. 200 his salary minus a null value is null only. 200 plus a null value is a null only. So 200 is equal to null, not possible. So 200 is not equal to null. So 200 into any of a null is null only. 200 is not equal to null. So this is a fair understanding that I want to give you about the null in SQL, because I say in SQL you will be learning or we will be dealing with the null quite a much. So this understanding is very, very important. Okay.